go back. All right, thanks everyone for joining us today for this lunch and learn. We call it a lunch and learn, but I know we have some different time zones, so some of you might be having an early lunch with us today. Today with the jam-packed schedule, I'll be here to try and keep everything on time. But we'll start off with Kathy Griffiths is joining us from IRAP to go over how you can access that 10K and the relationship with the ITA. For those who haven't followed up with me about whether or not you have an ITA already, please let me know and I'll ping you individually. Then we'll be going over the due diligence checklists and how to organize your data rooms leading up to the program. And then we have the amazing founders from Fortress.Legal who are joining us to do a demo of their product. And it's just a super easy way for you to put together and organize your data room. So thank you to them for joining us and for that awesome opportunity. And we'll chat a bit about the program and some next steps. But as I mentioned, it's jam-packed. So I think I'll just jump right into it and pass the floor over to Kathy. As always, if you have any questions at all, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll be there to moderate it as well.
Erin, can I add one suggestion? That if you, just so you guys can start to get to know each other too, if you could have your at least your first name, maybe your last name, and then your company name, they would be great to help everybody coordinate on who's who.
Good call, good call.
All right, over to me then, Erin.
Yes, that's right. You have the floor.
Yeah, and thanks for the shout out there, Jen. Appreciate it. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Kathy Griffiths. I've been in ITA with IRAP for just over 3 years now. Prior to that, I was in the telecommunications industry. My technical background is software engineering and math, and I spent more than 20 years in the telecommunications industry doing everything from software development management, product management. As my career progressed, I went into corporate data management, and then that led me to lead the data analytics organization at InnovaPost prior to joining IRAP, and really excited to be part of IRAP. I think it's a great program. I know a number of you aren't really familiar with the program, so I'm going to do a little bit of background on what it is and the value that it provides and the mission that the program's on. Then I'll talk about the ITAs and I'll explain a little bit about how our projects work and how you would access the 10K in non-dilutive funding to help you with your financial due diligence as you work through the SheBoot bootcamp. And then I'll talk about a couple of success stories as well. Just to give you an example of the benefit that IRAP can bring, IRAP and your ITAs. I'll share my screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Sorry about that. You should be able to do it now.
Yeah, I'm going to share my whole screen and you can still see everybody. That's great. Okay, so IRAP, it's part of the National Research Council of Canada. I'll give a quick blurb on the National Research Council. They've got research offices all across Canada. They do research in every industry imaginable, from digital technologies to ocean and air and military, and you name it, they do it at the National Research Council. So essentially the IRAP main mandate is to provide a comprehensive suite of innovation services and funding to help drive growth of small and medium enterprise. So in Canada, that's defined as companies under 500 employees, and to basically stimulate wealth generation in Canada. And it really is one of the most impactful program of its kind globally. And there is an international arm of the program as well that partners with similar programs internationally. So we basically serve over 8,000 small medium enterprise every year across all industry sectors. And that support comes in the form of professional advice. So I'll talk in more detail about the the ITAs that are become your personal advisor for the duration of your business's life, and thereafter, if that becomes the case, if you have an exit and you come back with another idea. So it's advice, it's connections, it can include funding through youth employment or introductions to other government departments who can also support you from a funding perspective. And then we also have a support for youth program, which is enabled or funded, I guess, by the Economic Social Development Canada organization of the government. And that's to generate opportunities for youth employment to gain experience in the technology innovation field. And then, I mentioned the international program. We are connected to global value change in a variety of ways through introductions to Global Affairs Canada or Can Export, or through our international program with its partners with its partners globally. So we have been in existence for 75 years. In fact, 2022 is the 75th anniversary for IRAP. In 2020 fiscal year, so I'll just mention briefly, the IRAP's, the Government of Canada's fiscal year runs from April 1st to March 31st. So this data is from the fiscal year that ran from April 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2021. And essentially, we contributed roughly $320 million directly to small, medium enterprise across Canada. More than 9,000 firms are receiving some sort of support from IRAP and their ITAs, and that can include advisory services by the network of ITAs, introductions to other organizations who provide advisory services or support. It can include funded projects, and it can include also referrals to other opportunities for accessing funding, introductions through our network to different organizations who could benefit from some of the capabilities and different services like that. IRAP is a regional program. On the previous chart, I do want to mention that from a quantitative perspective, IRAP is measured on our ability to generate revenue for Canada and to increase employment of highly qualified professionals. So those are the two quantified measurements. So as you're working with your ITA, those are the types of things they will be looking for. It's how are you going to generate wealth for Canada, and how are you going to increase employment in Canada? And then the third thing is, of course, innovation. So is there any intellectual property opportunities associated with that? It is a regional program. I'm open to pausing for questions, so feel free to just interrupt me if you do have a question at any point. So there are IRAP staff located in 110 communities across Canada, and your ITA will be in the same region as you, and typically within driving distance, so that they can visit with you in person as needed. The advantage of IRAP is this concept of smart money. So your industrial technology advisors are assigned to you for the life cycle of your business, and even beyond that for you personally, should you start a second or third business following the first one. And really the value is in the relationships with fellow ITAs across the network nationally, and there are ITAs in every industry sector, every different kind of background you could imagine, who also have relationships in industry to help make introductions and connections. The local presence is critically important because, we want you to see, the program wants you to see your industrial technology advisor as somebody who really is part of your business experience and there to help you be successful. And the networks, the expanded network of your IRAP ITAs is quite substantial. So, as mentioned, we distributed $320 million in project funding, but we actually have access to more than $1 billion in funding if you consider our networks through provincial funding organizations and other government departments as well, like Innovation Solutions Canada and D&D and the Strategic Innovation Fund, things like that. So the reason why the ITAs are assigned directly to their clients is so we can be very strategic and targeted about the investments that we make in the clients of IRAP. What we want to do is invest the right amount of money at exactly the right time to have a very specific impact on your trajectory. And that's where the idea of smart money comes from. So we do try to be as strategic as possible in how we place money with our clients. I'll talk a little bit about the ITAs now. There's more than 270 of us across Canada. So, I know that we've been growing in the last year to 18 months. Every ITA has private sector experience, typically 20 plus years experience. They're hired in from later in their career cycles. They are senior managers, executives, ex-entrepreneurs, VC fund managers, ex-angel investors, and again, like I said, across every industry sector. So we have ag, food, clean tech, digital economy, health and medical science, and most have advanced degrees in both engineering and science. So they are very technical in nature, and that's the main goal of the program, is to drive innovation, technology innovation in Canada. So the engagement model is really about advisory services. So providing business advice. There's a wealth of knowledge and experience in the ITA network. Many ITAs have now been here for more than 10 years, and they have seen a lot of startups scale and fail. So they have been able to learn a lot about how to best be successful in these initiatives. But not only that, we also can create linkages to other typically not-for-profit organizations, like SheBoot as an example, who have specific programs to help businesses at particular times in their journey, so that again, the program can have the biggest impact on a client's success. Strategic intelligence and then technical expertise are other areas of advisory service that are provided by the ITAs in the network. And then for the projects that get funding, which typically is about 30% of all clients who come in and are actually being helped. So of the 9,000 clients that are getting advice every year, about 30% of them get IRAP R&D projects, and those are typically tied very specifically to project objectives with outcomes that drive business growth, and they're framed around that. They're scoped in terms of who are the people working on the project and how many people are working on the project. They're scoped around that objective, and the ITAs will look for achievement of the business outcomes that were intended by the project over time. We also have a youth program, like I said, via the funding comes from Economic Social Development Canada, ESDC, and the goal of that program is to both add talent to SMEs as quickly as possible, as seamless as possible, and also create opportunities for youth to get exposure to jobs in their space of education. And then we also have the international program, which I mentioned earlier. I talked to this already. So these are the different sectors that our IRAP clients reside in. The digital economy is quite a massive line. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, for the last 10, 15, 20-ish years, there's been a lot of transition and it's even accelerated since COVID, but there's been a lot of transition of non-traditionally tech companies into the digital economy. So think of things like real estate or digital health. So in some cases, those items those clients fall under the digital economy section. Whereas, specific medical devices, for example, would fall under health and life sciences. And then by company size, so you'll note that the majority of the firms that are getting support from IRAP are in the startup phase. There are 0 to 9 employees. ITAs are very well versed in what steps companies need to take to get off the ground and how to be strategic in the help that they provide to maximize the input of the IRAP dollars that get invested. And then we have a handful that have 250 plus number of employees, and those companies are typically preparing to graduate IRAP, and that's where projects with a large value contribution over $1 million, up to $10 million, in fact, just in the last couple of years, can be provided to essentially help those clients both, expand internationally or expand into new markets, or just generally graduate from IRAP to be more than 500 employees and multinational enterprise. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the specifics of the projects. So, being a client of IRAP is not a guarantee that you're going to get a funded project, and there is a lot of value in the program beyond just the funded project. So it's really important to understand that and do your best to benefit from the wealth of experience and knowledge in the program. So we do fund, and the ITAs do the assessing, Canadian small medium enterprise that have the potential and willingness to grow through innovation. And we have to just determine basic eligibility, but again, just because you meet the basic eligibility requirements will not necessarily mean that you will be funded with a project. The exception is the 10K projects that have been allocated for the companies who are part of this SheBoot cohort. That's already set aside, it's already planned, but as you work with your ITA and start to talk about future projects, these are some things for you to keep in mind. So the basic eligibility is you need to be incorporated as a small medium enterprise and operating in Canada. You need to have 500 or fewer employees, and you need to have an objective to grow through technology and innovation. There are two things that ITAs do. ITAs assess the business and they assess the project. So when an ITA assesses the business, they are looking for the business opportunity, what's the market size, what's the competition look like, what does the go-to-market plan, is it the right business model? Those are the things that ITA is looking at. And the second thing is it the right team? So are these the right people in the management team to help this be successful? Do they have the right background, the right experience? Do they have the right advisors, that sort of thing? And then also, do they have the financial capacity to meet their obligations of the project? And I'll get into that in more detail, and also take whatever the project outcome is through commercialization and actually make revenue from it. And I sort of hinted at the next two in the last statement, so I'll skip that. And then the second thing is the assessment of the project. So most of the IRAP projects are technology or innovation related, and we do assess the objectives, the supporting activities, what does the project plan look like, what are the technical uncertainties and challenges. We look at the research and development teams or the engineering team's capacity to be successful. Do they have the right experience? Do they have the right education? Have they been with the company long enough? So we look at all of that. And then the potential impact from an intellectual property perspective, or from the perspective to generate wealth and employment of highly qualified individuals in Canada as well. And so initially, when you're a new client, the projects tend to be smaller, and your individual ITA will do both the business assessment and the project assessment at the same time. And as they're talking with you, they're doing all of that assessing as they're learning about your business strategy and your technology roadmap. They are assessing the project as those discussions are happening. And then as the project values increase, this is the way that the project stays fair and honest and protects itself from risk, is as the project values get larger, other ITAs are brought in to assess the business and the project in order to highlight risk. So I'll take a minute right now just to talk about risks. So when IRAP funds a project, it is risk-based. So when the individual ITA is doing these assessments, they are looking for where could this go off the rails? Where could this not, where could this break down and not achieve the anticipated result? And as the project values get larger, typically the ITA has spent much more time with their client and have become more enamored with their clients and maybe don't see all of the risks. And so that's why other ITAs are brought in to assess the project and the firms and the business elements of the firm. And in every case, they're looking for risks. So what are the risks that the intended results will not be achieved? And essentially, as long as we work with the client and the client has good mitigation plans for the risk as they're identified, then there's no issue. We just proceed with the project. The other thing I'll say while I'm on this topic of projects, because it tends to be a tough one for some clients, is it really takes a lot of time working with your ITA to get from a first meeting to a funded project. And it can feel like a lot of effort, perhaps. The way I describe it to my clients is every step you take down the path is a step closer to a project. So, because ultimately, by the time your ITA invites you to submit a proposal for a project, you're 90% of the way there. And unless anything unexpected comes up in the assessments for which a mitigation plan can't be identified, the project typically would get approved at that point. So just keep that in mind as you're working with your ITAs, and also make sure that you're maintaining a relationship with your ITAs on an ongoing basis and keeping them up to date on the progress your company is making and any challenges you're having, because the advisory services can come in handy. There could be a contribution to organization with Tech Access Canada to help address a technical uncertainty. There could be a research project with a researcher at the National Research Council that would get supported through IRAP that you don't have to pay very much for. Or even just calling in another ITA to help you get over a challenge. Try to benefit or leverage the value your ITA can provide as much as you possibly can. I'm getting close to being done. I haven't really been keeping very close track of time. I'm sorry, Erin. I think this is one of my last charts. So inside of IRAP, there's something called the Client Inclusivity Team, which I'm part of, and it was established a few years ago to identify and address barriers to growth of IRAP clients, specifically IRAP clients in the 4 equity groups as defined by the government of Canada, which includes women, Indigenous peoples, biracial, persons of color, and disabled people. And this team gets a budget every year, and it is one of the partners who's supporting the SheBoot program. And it also includes the 15 $10,000 projects for qualifying firms as part of the SheBoot cohort. So for those of you who have ITAs, I'm going to be emailing your ITAs this week to let them know that you've been selected as a cohort participant and remind them of the projects. So it is to a maximum of $10,000, and the way IRAP works is via reimbursement. So we will reimburse up to 80% of any employee, full-time equivalent employee costs on a project, and up to 50% of any contract-related costs that you have. So if you have to hire out a third-party contracting agency to complete some aspect of your financial due diligence projects, then we would reimburse up to 50% of that. And your ITAs will know how to access the funding for that and the steps to take to create a project for you. So it should be pretty straightforward once I get the emails out to your ITAs for you to find out how to get that taken care of. But you will work on that with each of your individual ITAs. They will create the proposal for you to submit. You will submit the proposal. They will do the lead ITA recommendation. They will make sure that the funding is in place for you and send their recommendation to the contracting authority in their regions for approval. Okay, so that is really my last chart. I'm just going to highlight 2 success stories. So I'm just going to let you read them because there were a number of success stories in the package, but these two in particular referenced the value the ITAs provided. And I really want to reinforce the importance of building a relationship with your ITAs and keeping the dialogue going with them, even if they're not funding a project with you. Keep them informed of your risks, of your gaps, of the things that are keeping you up at night, because there may be ways that they can help you aside from funding that you don't even aren't even aware that could be something that they could provide help with. So I'm going to read it actually. I think of NRC IRAP as a program that grows companies right from the seed up. As you work with them through different business stages and your company evolves, you can see how strategic the ITAs are in terms of the progression and sequencing of business activities. They're basically plotting out a roadmap for you and helping you as you grow. And then this is another one, Apply Board. So Apply Board actually is a recent Canadian unicorn, and they go on to reference our ITA. Our ITA is very invested in the success of our company and proud of all the work that's been done. It's almost like having a caring big brother who is with you every step of the way. They happen to have a male ITA, but they could have been a big sister. That's the difference with NRC IRAP versus other innovation support programs. And that's all I had. I'll stop sharing and I'll take questions if there are any.
We have a few minutes for questions. I just want to clarify. So I have been collecting all of the folks that don't have ITAs already, and Kathy will be helping to select ITAs in your region with the industry focus as well. And there was one question in the chat. If we have an existing project with IRAP, is it possible the funds will just be added to that, or will we need to create a new project description for the 10K spend?
Yeah, you will need to create a brand new project for the 10K financial due diligence project. It will be independent of the one that you have.
Great question. Thanks, Karen. And Masu, I'll go to you. You have your hand up, and then we'll go to the question.
For sure. Hi, Erin. Hi, Katie. Thank you very much for all of the amazing information. I have two questions. They're somewhat related. First one, I know that IRAP, from what I understand, is a bit more focused on R&D projects. For those of us that are really close to commercialization, are we still eligible for IRAP funding? And then the second is, do you provide any matching funds? So let's say if we have a fund from MyTax or NSERC or other places, would IRAP match those funds? Thank you.
Okay, so on the first one, I didn't get into the details of this, and you can explore this a little bit more with your individual ITAs. So the majority of IRAP projects are for R&D projects, and typically that's anything over 75K. However, there are projects called small value contribution projects or accelerated review projects, ARPs they're often called as well, which can be used for a variety of things. And this is why I'm encouraging you all to stay connected with your ITAs on all of your challenges, because this is where they can be used for technical feasibility studies, they can be used for market research, they can be used to help you hire your first marketing resource and contract out a marketing firm to help you build brand strategy. They can help you with sales process. They can help you if you're preparing to scale. They can help you with back-end system operation analysis to determine, what systems you need to have in place so that you can be successful scaling. So under $75,000, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how IRAP can help you with projects. But yes, typically anything over 75K is needs to be an R&D project. I will add one more thing, which is probably just going to confuse everybody. However, we just recently launched a pilot program for something called business innovation. And so if there's a particularly innovative, marketing approach or business model or, a novel way of doing sales, or the product's so different that you need to discover a novel way of doing sales, then we can fund some projects over 75K to support business innovation. But those typically aren't for startups. Those are from companies who have already secured a lot of traction. They already have a marketing team in place, and they, for some reason, need to create or look at modifying their models slightly to be more successful.
Thank
So
you.
just to confirm, I know there's some questions in the chat about what's eligible, and maybe they'll be connected with their ITA to go over it, but it is this grant is focused on R&D project, right?
No, these $10,000 projects are for financial due diligence and setting up the data room.
Okay, perfect.
So they're not for an R&D project. The objectives are very specific to have your financials and your data room set up in a way that you're ready for investors to start looking at your company.
So Kathy, just to ask on that. So I think a few companies may already have a lot of the data room set up. Are there other things they can apply that 10K to related to getting investment?
Okay, so let's explore each of those on a case-by-case basis. Jennifer, maybe we can look at, we can have discussions with their individual ITAs and the lead of the client inclusivity team to determine what opportunities may exist, but I can't answer that now, and it may not be a yes for every situation.
Okay.
And just the last question, and then we'll continue on here, is how long it will take to get the 10K approved. Maybe you can provide some light of the timeline that they can expect, Kathy.
Okay, so the funding's already confirmed. So, depending on your ITA's availability, it takes them just a few minutes to open a proposal in the portal. Of course, they're going to want to meet you first and understand, your business. So that'll need to be scheduled. So I would say probably from the time of meeting your ITA to actually opening the proposal for you to start working on it is going to be anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the ITA's availability. And then you submit the proposal with the project objectives. The quality of the proposal is going to determine how fast that gets turned around. So if you're really clear on your objectives and the supporting activities and what the outcomes are expected to impact from a business perspective, then that can take anywhere from a couple of days to 2 or 3 weeks, maybe longer. I've had some seemingly simple projects that took 6 weeks to get the proposal in the state. So, but the proposal is what you're drafting. So the more you work with your ITA to meet their expectations, the faster that's going to happen. Once the proposal is accepted, then it takes a couple hours for an ITA to prepare a lead ITA recommendation into the contracting authority for approval. So again, depending on the ITA's availability, that could take a week. And then going to the contracting authority for review and approval. These are pretty small projects, so again, that should be pretty quick, like an hour max for a contracting authority to review and approve, but it depends on the contracting authority's availability in terms of when they can prioritize it for review. So again, that can take anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks. So it could be as little as 2 weeks, or it could be much longer depending on how the process is.
And last question, and then we'll have to move on. Is there a set timeline that they need to have the project start by or end by? Kathy, do you know?
Well, I think part of that question might need to go to Jennifer and Julia. It needs to, from an IRAP perspective, it doesn't really matter when it starts. It needs to finish before the end of our fiscal year, which is March 31st, 2023. But maybe Julie and Jennifer can ask, when does it need to be at the earliest side? Does it need to be before Accelerate OTT or anything like that?
I think really what we're looking for is all the data rooms to be as prepared as possible given the time available. So, if these funds will help you move forward faster to achieve those results, then, we recommend jumping on them and maximizing the value you're getting from them so that you can be prepared for the end of October.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kathy. And if there's ever any other questions, I'll follow up with you. We'll talk a bit more about Circle, but I recommend that you post them in there because if you have the question, it's likely that other founders will have the question as well. But let's move on and we'll chat more about the due diligence and the data rooms that you can use these funds for. And I'll share my screen and I'll pass the floor over to Jennifer to speak to it.
Great, thanks, Erin. So we're just going to walk through now. All of you should have received the due diligence checklist from Erin, and we're going to walk through a little bit of context around that now and answer any questions that you might have. So next slide. So first, I just wanted to put the due diligence into the context of the fundraising process. So it's one of the later steps that you will go through when you're starting to fundraise. And I know some of you have already been down this process, and some of you are just starting to think about going down this process. So generally, when you're starting to raise investment, the first period, you're getting intros. Depending on who you're planning to pitch to, there might be a screening process. In fact, there almost always is a screening process, whether it's an angel group where they have a screening committee, or a VC where they've got analysts that are looking at the companies before they pitch them in front of the partners. So you go through that process. When you get through that intro screening process, then you're doing the pitch to the investors, whether they're at the VC or in an angel group, to capture the interest of those. The next step after the pitch is typically a deep dive meeting where they're going to get together with you. It's going to be a much longer. The pitch is usually somewhere between 15 minutes and 45 minutes that you've got with the investors. The deep dive, you've now intrigued them, they're interested, they're going to ask you a lot more questions. That deep dive meeting is usually a few hours, will vary from VC angel groups as to how long that is, but that's usually some form of interactive Q&A. After that, the investors will decide how interested they are, what investment level they're thinking about for that. And sometimes you'll hear a term of soft circled. I've soft circled 25K, I've soft circled 100K. And at that point, now I'm interested in investing in your company. I've decided how much I'm probably interested in investing in your company. Now I want to go into the due diligence process and confirm my assumptions. Assuming that that all works out, I'm then going to move into the close, complete the paperwork, the money transfer, and in parallel to that, any deal negotiation terms that have to happen. So that's generally the process. You're getting into due diligence once you have interest from the investors and some level of understanding of how much they're likely to invest in your company before you open up this level of detail about your company. Next slide. So what is the due diligence? It's really a disciplined investigation of the potential investment, and you're trying to confirm the material facts in regards to the investment during the DD process. The level of detail will vary from investor to investor. So you'll occasionally come across somebody who's willing to write you a check with very little due diligence. You will have other investors that are going to read through with a fine-tooth comb every document of every sort that you could possibly provide to them. Most people are somewhere in the middle. So what we've provided to you is sort of the foundational due diligence checklist that you will find most angel groups, most VCs will want at least that level of information. The reason that we're going through this now, deals will progress faster if you have the bulk of this material ready before the investors confirm their interest. I'll speak from my own experience. When I've been, so I'm chair of Capital Angel Network here in Ottawa. I've been doing angel investing for about 8 years. When we get interest in a company, so a bunch of angels want to invest in a company, now we want to move into due diligence. When the company doesn't have anything ready, and they're like, oh, okay, let me go find out what should I be providing to you, and they go off and they do it. You can lose a lot of momentum. It can take, and you'll find this as you go through this process, it can take weeks to pull together all of this. You might find you've got some missing information. things like that you have to deal with. And those investors that were interested in you, by the time you've got the due diligence package together, if you didn't have it mostly ready at the start of the deal process, they might have moved on to another deal. Their money gets reallocated to somebody else, they lose interest, or they go off on vacation, or stuff happens and your investment gets delayed or actually stopped through this. So this is why we're taking you through this early, is so that you can get all of this information together, and it will really help with the momentum of an investment round if you are ready and prepared with all the due diligence information when your investors are ready and prepared to write a check. Next slide. So managing the checklist. So it is a relatively long checklist. You will find, as I said earlier, you will find some investors will want a few things that aren't on that list, but almost everybody will want the things that are on that list. So basically what you want to do is start with what you already have, the low-hanging fruit. All right, so go through the checklist, find the things that are already around, and start putting them in, organizing it into folders. You can organize it into folders the way the checklist is organized, or you might have another way that you want to organize it. But you want to put it into folders. You want to note which items do not apply to your company. So for instance, in the legal section, I think it's in the legal section, there might be information about your board minutes and your board members. If you're a one-person company, you may not have that. Or a small company, you may not have that yet. You may not have set up a formal board. You may not have formal board minutes yet. So you just note that those are the things that are missing or that don't apply to your company. And you might be in a company where you don't have IP, but you have some other sustainable differentiation. So you would note that. Then you want to create a list of what's incomplete and what's missing. And this is where you're going to start working and where the IRAP funding can come in to help, right? You might find, oh, I'm missing a few legal items. I don't have my financial projections done yet. There's some other things that I have to get done. So now you want to start that process of getting those missing pieces itemized. And you want to prioritize the outstanding items based on which ones are going to impact potential investment the most, right? So if you don't think it's high impact, if you think you could probably get investment without that one being complete, focus on the ones that you know that investors will really care about. So for instance, if you don't have one yet, the shareholder agreement is typically fairly high up the list. Employment contracts, who owns the IP in your company, fairly high up. There might be some other things that are a little lower priority. So you want to go through, and we'll help you with that over the course of the program. In terms of sorting through your missing items, you can work with, we're going to have coaches and advisors around who can help you with, what's the priority? I should be tackling the things that are missing from the checklist. That will help you get it prepared, and then you can start working on the missing items, and that can be your IRAP project, is working through those missing items or helping to organize the stuff that you already have. Okay. And then we'll walk you through today what the content sessions are, but they will help you finish going through this process. Okay. So I'm not going to go through in detail all of these. What I really wanted to do was just going through the high level. And if you have questions on what some of these things are, this would be a good time to ask them as we go through. But a few things first. So your corporate records, your corporate structure. Okay, so a couple of things are critical. So your articles of incorporation, that you're properly incorporated, that you've got your bylaws, that you've got any needed corporate records. You may not have a formal board yet. That is not at all unusual to not have a formal board before you start raising investment. In fact, frequently that comes after investment, and your investors will help you with setting up a formal board. But some of you might have a formal board. And if you do have a formal board, you want to document that, and you want to make sure that you've got any shareholder meetings, minutes, things like that. all put together. And the corporate records are critical. Because when you start to take an investment, this all has to be clean. So I have certainly seen deals fall apart because the company wasn't properly incorporated, or it was incorporated, but the shareholder class types was not set up, things like that, so that you couldn't really take an investment because you're not structured for investment yet. So those are the things that you really have to have. The next area is shareholder information. So the capitalization table or cap table, this is the ownership of your company from a cap table perspective. For many of you, that cap table is going to be you, any other founders, and whether or not you have an option pool. Some of you have already got friends and family investment and things that would also be included in the cap table. The cap table is typically done in a spreadsheet. One tab will be the equity holdings. So if you own 100% of it, then it would be me 100% on the first tab. Any safes or convertible notes that you have would typically be in other tabs of that cap table. Right? So that an investor looking at your company knows what the company structure is and what the ownership structure is and what investment you've got. If you've got different classes of shares, that would be described, any options, things like that, your financing history, your shareholder agreements, any other financing related documents. So if you've done other financing, what those agreements are would be in that folder. Next. So from a finance perspective, there's the sort of basic stuff. Do you have money? Have you properly done your tax returns? You know, are you in trouble with Revenue Canada, things like that? That's all clean. If you've got any debt, things like that. What most investors though are really interested in, they will check the sort of foundational finance side, but they're really interested in the forward-looking finances. So your pricing strategy and your sales forecasts, your 3-year financial plan and budget, what you're planning to do. So when you're taking an investment, what I'm looking for when taking an investment, what I will be trying to confirm in your finance folder is how long will that money last? What sort of runway do you have? And, have you put together what looks like a solid financial plan in terms of when you're going to be getting revenue, when you're going to run out of cash? Masood, you got a question?
Yes, Jennifer, on the finances, the financial statement, do we need to ask an accountant to actually look into it and finalize it, or can we do it? Because this is one of the questions that I have. Oh, did you do it? And it's they need some sort of credit and authorship about financing. Do we need some person who is expert in financing to look into our financial planning, and especially the budget for 3 years or not?
It does help, and we'll be doing a session on financials, and we've got financial coaches who can help you. It certainly helps to have someone, if you don't have a financial background, it helps to have someone with a financial background look over it. Partly because not so much on the tax return side. It's certainly possible without being an accountant to do tax returns, particularly if your financial situation is relatively simple. You've got straightforward money coming in, money going out from a tax return perspective, right? When you're looking at your 3-year plan, and you're looking, which is going to be coupled with your pricing strategy, your sales forecast, all of these are tied together. And having someone with a financial background, if you don't have a financial background, looking over it can really help. And it depends on what area you're in, but how you forecast software as a service revenue is different from how you might forecast hardware, manufacturing, working capital, what assumptions you've made in terms of fixed costs and variable costs. It's just good to have someone with a financial background read it over. and do a
I
sanity check.
I see as them trying to poke holes in it before investors try and poke holes in it.
Yeah.
That's one way to look at it, right?
Yeah.
And the finance session is in the first week, and I think you'll find it amazing. So
Thank you both. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's when you're going through on the finances, yeah, you want the investors to be like, generally as they're going through the due diligence process, it's fine to have questions being asked. In fact, you can build a relationship with your investors through the due diligence process as they ask questions. But if it looks like you've done something that you didn't really understand, that can hurt you. You know, if it's incomplete, that's not really an issue. If it's wrong, that can set you back. Which is why it's good to have someone, and some of you might have financial backgrounds and be able to do this yourselves. But as a CEO, you've got a lot of areas you've got to look at. So it's always good to get a second set of eyes on something before your investors, so that your investors are, you know, pleasantly taken through the process. Okay. It is not expected that you will have a finance person on staff at this stage. But having somebody who's looked over would be advisable. Okay, next. So technology and IP. So anything that you've got, so identifying your IP is important. Investors will be looking for what is your sustainable moat? What is your differentiation? And in many cases, that differentiation is intellectual property, that you've got patents or potential patents or trade secrets or other items that will be your sustainable differentiation that you can protect and grow your company with. So those sorts of things, you want to document it so that as the investors go through, they've got a sense of what unique items that you've got that investment is going into. Many investors are also looking for a summary of technological risk. If you are doing something that's unique and differentiated and you're the first doing it, there's likely to be some risk. Having risk in your business is not always a negative thing. Having risk that you don't understand can be a negative thing, but having some risk in your business, it just says you're trying to do something unique and different. Right? And you'll find that as well when you're applying for government grants and things, that they're also looking for, you know, a level, not an unacceptable level of risk, but some level of risk that says you're trying to do something unique. So don't treat that as a negative, but, you know, write it in a way that says that you understand the risk, that you've got mitigation plans for that risk, but that you are trying to do something different is basically what the risk side is. Next. Contracts, you know, understanding, so listing out any other assets you've got, anything else that might be of value within your company, any trademarks, trade names, service marks, copyrights, all that sort of thing in your business. And then from a contracts perspective, employee contracts if you've got employees, and then any supplier or consultant contracts that you might have. From a consultant and employee perspective, one of the things that people will be looking for is who owns the assets of the company. So if you've got a consultant who developed some aspect of your offering, making sure that the contract is there that says that you own it. This is also true if you've used free resources. Right. So if you've found volunteers to do stuff for you, you know, investors will be looking to make sure that, you know, whether you paid them or didn't pay them, that you have an agreement that anything that they built, you own. So making sure that that's all in place. And if you don't have that, then you'll want to go back and secure that. Right. So it's not unusual to have used free resources. And it's not unusual to forget that you need to still have some sort of contract in place on the ownership of the assets. So just going through and making sure all of that is there, any partners that you've got, any other material contracts that you have in your business that so that investors know what you control, what you're relying on partners for, how much of your business you own, who else might own pieces of your business, what the dependencies are on your business, so that when I'm investing, I know what I'm investing in. Are the things that we'll be looking for there. And then on the employees and directors, an org chart. Many of you won't have very many employees, so this shouldn't take too long to create if you don't already have it. The list of the employees, a breakdown of the functions, that might be just 2 or 3 people. In some cases, it might only be 1 person. A few of you might have more employees than that. So writing down who does what, any directors, relationship to the company, the people that are consulting or contract, co-op, volunteer, others. And then if you've got, founders that, as some companies have founders who are no longer with the company, what's that relationship? What agreements you have with founders that have left? Any other agreements that you've got, any advisor agreements that you might have, would all go into this section. Next. And then just any other items, and some of these items will vary depending on what type of business that you're in. So if you're in health tech, you might have government regulations. Well, you will have government regulations and compliancy. If you've got privacy or security regulations that you have to abide by, you would be listing things out here. It would show that you understand your industry. If you've already achieved the regulation or compliance, you would document it in this section. If you haven't, but you're planning to, so if you've got FDA regulatory, you put that in here. If you know that you're going to be going for that in the next 6 months, you would put that in here instead. Any insurance that you might have, depending on what kind of business you're in, you will need more or less insurance. So having that. If you've got current or threatened or potential litigation, you would put that in here as well. I was working with a company last year who had tried to avoid the fact that they had litigation going on with a former founder. It did come out, it set things back by 6 months. So, it's just better to just disclose and work through it. And, if you disclose that you've got an issue with a former employee or founder or someone else, putting it in here, sometimes your investors can help you through it. But if you don't disclose it and it gets discovered, it's going to be much worse than if you just disclose it. And I don't know that any of you are in this situation, but I've certainly come across companies that are in this situation. So that would go in here. And that is the checklist. So any other questions on this checklist or items from it? How many of you already have a partial due diligence checklist?
Some hands raised.
Yeah, just put it in you. Yeah, so so if you've already got a part of it, that's great. And then we can help you with any missing areas that you might have. From a data room, we'll go through a demo of Fortress.Legal as a potential for your data room. That's a company from last year. And we've got, can't remember whether we have Jen or Nat or both on the call today who will take you through it.
We're both here.
Perfect. So that's available as an option for your data room. If you've already got a data room, and it sounds like several of you have already started, a Google Drive, Dropbox, other options in terms of how to organize it. You'll want to ensure that it's secure. This is valuable information for your company. You don't want it just sitting unsecured somewhere. You do want to make it easy for investors to find things. So, having a README at the start that tells them where most of your stuff is, how to navigate. You do want to make it view only. You don't want your investors accidentally changing your information, as that can happen. Someone accidentally deletes a document when they thought they were deleting their own copy, stuff like that. So you want to make sure whatever you do use, it's view only, and that it's easy to use, got to read me, and a fairly straightforward folder structure. Okay, and I think that was the last of my slides.
Yeah, any questions for Jennifer? Sue, I see you're raising your physical hand. Yeah.
Okay, so on my list, and I know like company to company, it's really different, but on my list of the data room, we have things like employee manual, technology roadmap, business roadmap, looking at product and those kind of things, especially for folks who have a very kind of deep tech product. How much of those are important at this stage for like a company like us? Or those are like really depends on the VC and how they approach data due diligence?
It will depend. Most people would not expect a startup to have an employee handbook. It doesn't hurt that if you have one and you throw it in there.
But
In
the
terms of-
technology roadmap is very valuable, right?
Yeah.
To show where you're going, for any investor.
Yeah, and your technology roadmap, like the high level of your roadmap should be in your pitch as well, because when you're pitching, you want them to get excited about your vision and your direction. So that would be in there. In terms of, some investors will look for a business plan. Other investors don't think startups should build business plans because they want you to be more nimble. And business plans tend to take a lot of time and then sort of lock you into a strategy. So it really varies from investor to investor on how they view a business plan. But having a strategy is always a good thing.
Okay, good. And a follow-up question, if I may, is the valuation, like things that some folks have obsession, like I, some don't. For the valuation, how I think about it is competition landscape and be very true about where folks were in our stage, like let's say 2 years ago, and how they evolve and what are the opportunities. Do you think that is going to be a good way of communicating your value as a business, especially if you're a startup, or like we should focus on our asset as opposed to what's happening out there?
No, so I wouldn't use the data room as a way for your investors to try and analyze your value. You're going to be positioning up front what you want as a valuation and negotiating with your investors on whether that valuation is reasonable. The data room should be very factual. And it's really confirming my assumptions on whether or not I'm going to invest. So, I've seen your information. We've got a general view that, your company is worth 5 million or 10 million or 2 million or 12 million or whatever the number is, and I'm generally comfortable with that number. And I'm putting aside 100,000, and now I want to go into the due diligence folder. If I go into the due diligence folder and I find your financials are a quarter of what I had thought, I will rethink the valuation. But before you should be going into the due diligence with some level of a soft committed investment, which means that you've already agreed on a valuation, right? Because very few investors will agree to invest without agreeing on the valuation. And so what they're doing in the due diligence is confirming things. You don't want to put a bunch of stuff in the due diligence that raises brand new questions. You want stuff in the due diligence that answers questions.
But
Absolutely.
valuation is a big topic.
Yeah.
So, I think we're not doing it's real service today, but I think something we have to come back to as well.
Yeah.
And Anara, you had a question, and then we'll
Yeah, just quick question regarding IP and proprietary information. Should we be sharing detailed patent filings, or would receipts kind of suffice, just because like if an investor is going through the due diligence process and they decide not to invest, they suddenly have all this knowledge regarding our IP. So is that something that we should be putting on our drives or our data rooms?
So if you have patents filed, you should be
Yes.
putting them in the data room.
Those are
if you-
public documents.
Yeah,
If they're not public yet, though, like if they are pending, okay. got
yeah,
it.
I would put them in there. If you've got, if you're concerned about the level of private information that you've got, I have certainly signed NDAs in order to get access to a data room.
Okay,
And we do have a patent lawyer in the room too, actually.
Yeah.
But I would just add to that, there are, to me, unfiled patents need an NDA.
Yeah.
The other information you may want to put in front of the investor, but then ask for an NDA before they get to the patent, the filed patents. And I think
Yeah,
that's what Jen and Nat would say too.
Yeah, I was going to say, Nat and
Yeah.
I would probably advise, don't put any unpublished proprietary material in the data room. You can just
Okay.
put a note referencing the existence of that material. And then if the investor wants to review the material, then you can get an NDA in place and confidentially share that material.
Yeah.
yeah, makes a lot of sense, because I think a lot of investors kind of don't want to sign an NDA until they're really sure.
Yeah.
So that's been something that we've always hesitated with, but that's super helpful. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for that.
Do the
Yeah, I
two
mean,
levels, yeah.
remember, when they're going into this level of detail, if they're completely just tire kicking, you want to take them back to, a deep dive, not giving them access to all these documents to read. When you're giving them access to the data room, and I know it can be hard, right? They've got the money, you don't, you need the money. They're saying, well, I'm not even going to consider until I get access to this, blah, blah, blah. Like I get all the dynamics and the power dynamics around investment. But generally, when you're giving this level of documentation, you want investors that have already decided that unless something is wrong, they want to invest.
There's other angel groups that force the data room before the deep dive, though, Jennifer, right? So it's not really a fair situation in that case, but
Yeah, but I would do that under NDA.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I think we got to move on to Fortress, right, Erin?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So we'll follow up with this deck. Just know we'll be covering finance, legal, right at the top of the program. And then you'll be paired. There was a question about the being paired with the coaches who can certainly help with all of these elements as well. So it's a good idea to get everything for your data rooms together now, but we'll also be there to support you. And I will stop sharing my screen and pass it over to Nat and Jen, who will be talking about Fortress now.
Great. Thanks, Erin.
Thank
Yeah, so before I start sharing my screen, I just want to say how excited Natalie and I are to be partnering with SheBoot this year, because we were actually sitting in your places last year. We were part of the cohort last year. Can't say enough about SheBoot and about the organizers and all the coaches and IRAP and all the supporters. It was just fantastic, and it really helped us get investor ready. We actually started our raise toward the end of the SheBoot program, and were able to basically, we were super prepared for our pitches. Our pitch deck was sharp, our presentation skills were sharp, and we closed a very successful round pretty quickly. So yeah, it's a great program, and I know you're all going to get a lot out of it. And we're really excited to actually be partnering with SheBoot this year in terms of our product offering, Fortress.Legal, which we're going to be telling you about right now. And basically, actually, I'll let Nat talk about the partnership before I go into more of an intro.
Great. So you'll have access to a 6-month full license to the platform, and we're hoping beyond that if you want to stay on and keep full access, that you'll come on with a subscription. But if not, your data room, you'll have access to be able to use the data room feature. So the data room feature is a free feature that we're providing. It's part of our starter plan, and so if you decide that you put your information here, but long-term, you don't want to continue with all the features that we'll be talking about, you can stay on the platform with your data there and keep your data room. So without further ado, Jen.
Yeah, I'm just going to get into my full screen mode here. Okay, can you guys see my see the screen there?
What we say with the notes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Your presentation.
well, no, I don't want you to see my notes. Hold on, that's secret. That's the secret part. All right, give me a second here. Full screen. Okay, I'm not very tech savvy. That's my problem. You'd never know I was a founder of a tech company.
It's all good.
Okay, so I'm not sharing right now, right?
You're still sharing, just maybe
You're
Okay, I'm
sharing
gonna stop sharing.
the full presentation.
Try this again.
Mhm.
Okay, go to full screen first. Is this new version of PowerPoint that, okay, now how do I find you guys to share? Okay, I think I'm gonna be able to do it here. I'm so sorry. Okay, share screen. Okay, this one. This one. How's that look? No?
yeah, that's good, Jen.
You're seeing just the screen now? Just the slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So basically, Fortress.Legal, what is it? It's a secure multi-sided platform where innovative small and medium-sized companies can track and manage all of their valuable intangible assets. So this is going to include your ideas, your trade secrets, your intellectual property, contracts, and your business or corporate data to basically help you grow faster and achieve higher valuations. And it's also a really great tool for securely collaborating with your lawyers, your investors, and other advisors. And for the past 2 decades, Nat and I have been working with innovative companies of all sizes. And we know that some of the biggest ideas actually come from small and medium-sized companies like yours and like ours. And so we built Fortress to basically ensure that every great idea has an equal chance of success, not just ideas that come out of large companies that have big budgets. They have access to really expensive software tools to keep them organized and for collaborating, and they have their own in-house advisors. And in fact, large companies generally fill their own growth pipelines by doing deals with smaller companies like us. And so we all want to make sure that we're getting the best valuation possible. And worse, sometimes big companies just copy our ideas if we're not protected from the outset. So this is really important. This stuff really matters, and you want to make sure that you're carefully managing your valuation along with your revenues and your growth. Company size doesn't matter in terms of who can benefit from Fortress. Basically, you are all looking to raise money and attract investment. That's why you're here. So Fortress is relevant to you and your business. And it's really important. Now is a great time to get organized from the get-go and to be carefully managing all of your assets moving forward. You need to be in control of all of this. Your industry also doesn't matter. We all have important assets to manage, and proper management directly impacts our valuation and our ability to attract investment and our growth. So it might not sound sexy, but management of these assets is critical to our business. And you're all also very busy, and you're only going to get busier as your company grows, and you're only going to have more and more documents and information to manage. So having everything in one central place and being able to run reports on demand and securely share your information is going to become increasingly important. As well, we're going to have turnover in our companies, so we want to make sure there's institutional knowledge as well that's being generated and that everything's in one place inside the company. And the best part is you can actually have your lawyers, your accountants, and any other advisors put important information and documents right into the platform for you, so that you don't have these enormous amounts of emails building up and piling up in your inbox. You know exactly where to go to find your information. And lawyers and advisors like that as well, because they don't have to resend you information all the time. And it also reduces the risk that something is going to get missed or lost. And you'll also get notifications and due dates in the platform as well. So it can really save you a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of stress. And of course, as a founder and a CEO, you really are expected to have your finger on the pulse of everything that's happening inside your company at all times. And that can be hard sometimes, especially when different people inside the company are responsible for different things. So this is a great way to basically keep yourself informed and keep line of sight on everything that's happening in the company. And so we like to ask founders this question. Let's say you're sitting at the airport and you happen to meet this rich investor next door that's taking an interest in the conversation and your company, and he's got 10 minutes before his next flight, or she's got 10 minutes before her next flight, and really wants to ask you some questions about your corporate structure, your data room, wants you to answer some questions about your corporate assets, your IP strategy, or some of your key contracts. Would you be prepared to have that discussion? Would you be prepared to answer those questions? And what if you could pull everything up on your phone at the airport that you needed to wow that investor? And even run a status report on demand. That's the type of thing that you can do with Fortress.Legal. It's going to ensure that you're always ready for those conversations. You're always investor ready, partner ready, and you always have a clear line of sight on all of your important business data and processes. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Nat to tell you a little bit more about the components of the platform and how it works.
Perfect, thanks. So I will now share my screen. All right, can you see my screen?
Yeah, and I'm going to unshare. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great, perfect. Great. So I've logged into the platform, and I'm gonna show the perspective from a few different company angles. But we've come in. We're in ABC Inc. right now, and what you're seeing is our dashboard, which gives you a look into a few deadlines that are coming up. So when you come into the platform, if you've got things happening with contracts or patents or trademarks, you're going to see those due dates, and you're also going to get a weekly digest. But we've been talking a lot about data rooms, so we wanted to come over and show you that feature, and so you can see what the default setup is. And what we've done is we've set up the data room with the structure that you'd be familiar with SheBoot in terms of looking at your checklist. So let's say you're coming into corporate records here. You'll see right here all of the folders that you need to populate to, quote unquote, be compliant for SheBoot. So if you don't see a little blue mark with a number, that means that particular folder is still empty. But you can bring in, you can put your files in here. It's very easy to drag and drop folders over. And I'm going to show you with just some sort of dummy data here that you can bring in different types of files all at once. And just drag things over, and you can quickly, rename things, and PDF, PowerPoint, PNG, and quite quickly have these things uploaded in your data room. And now you have 3 documents that are in your bylaw section. So the same thing, legal and insurance, all these different areas that investors want to look at. What's your insurance coverage? Are there certain permits that you need? Are you in the biotech space, for example? What do your terms of service look like? Those EULA agreements, privacy policies, shareholder information. Do you have all this at your fingertips? And as Jen said, you can pull this up on a mobile, but also you can get help from your accountant. You can give your accountant access to your finance folder and have your accountant bring in your tax returns. So they would just have particular access to that area and be able to help you stay populated on a regular basis, so that as tax returns are going, you don't need to go to their portal to pull information, as you may be familiar with through your lawyers. But they would actually help you get the information into Fortress. So you can actually share access externally and keep yourself organized. And you can also create, these are the default data rooms, but you can create additional rooms as well, like specific rooms for specific investment events and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to flip over and show you also how you can easily create reports. So what we've done in Fortress is we've helped companies also organize around unregistered IP, which is what many of you probably have, which is, contracts, copyright, ideas, trade secrets, maybe open source software that you're using. And then some of you will have already taken the step to register your IP, and you may have registered patents, registered trademarks. And so we've come in here and looked at a particular company, another demo company, Demo Inc. And what I'm going to do for you is click here to generate a contract report. And I've already populated that. So I'll show you what that looks like by bringing that over. And so if I click contract report, what I can easily pull from the system is a report on all my contracts. So you'll see, who are you dealing with? What family of contracts? So for example, when you start a contract agreement with a customer, it might be an NDA. But then later on, it becomes potentially an actual customer contract. So you started with Sprint, an NDA. Now you have a customer contract. It's executed. You may have things that are still being drafted. So you can look at your statuses and your descriptions quite quickly and pull a report on your contracts. And if you see something interesting in here, you can simply click the hyperlink and come back into that instance. So this master software agreement with Sprint, for example, you can come in here and say, okay, this agreement was already signed because I see a check mark in here. And now I can go in and take a look at the documents. Okay, so this is the working version of the contract that I used. This is the executed version of the agreement. And, I don't have a template in here. Correspondence, where's all that email correspondence? So one of the great things about Fortress is that it's not just about what DocuSign or some of these other contract management softwares do where they track the contracts, but you have a place to drag and drop those emails. So as you're negotiating those contracts and they're taking time, sometimes what you're saying over email can color the interpretation of a contract. And later when there's a dispute, you may need to come back to those emails to say, well, actually over email, we meant this. And so maybe the contract's not clear, but this is really what we meant. And the emails, so often as an IP lawyer, I have to come back to the correspondence and say, well, the contract's not clear, but what did the parties intend? The party's intention is in those emails. So keeping track of that. And then also having a notes section in here. So you can either have notes that you're just putting in there yourself, so private notes to yourself, or you can actually include in Fortress shared notes. So notes that anyone that has access will be able to see those. So you're able to put notations on all the different modules as well. And then what I wanted to also show you, so this is in terms of being able to run reports. There's a guidance section that you can get information in. We also are able to do bulk import. So if you already have a data room, for example, that you want to import into Fortress, we can help you with that. We could also data import this kind of tombstone information when it comes to contracts. But the other neat thing is if you have multiple companies, or what's going to be helpful to, sorry, let me just come in here and log out from the perspective of a law firm logging in, is, when Invest Ottawa investors are coming in, they're going to be able to look at the various companies that are in Fortress in a secure fashion. So your investor will be able to toggle between the different SheBoot companies and take a look at their data room. So you can come back into Demo, and now Demo Inc. They've actually built on that basic data room, and they have a little bit more to it, versus ABC Inc. has stuck with the traditional format. So they'll be able to be investor, which makes it easier, obviously, for the investor to toggle between the two different areas of the data room. So that was sort of a quick run through, leaving us with a couple minutes at the end here. Jen, did you want to pipe in?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that as well, when you build out your data room in Fortress, you would basically provide visibility to the SheBoot investors so that they can actually come in and review your data room. And then at the end of the SheBoot program, if you do stay on the platform, the nice thing is that then you just stop sharing with that group, and then but you get to keep the data room and you get to keep building on it as your company grows.
That's it. So you're able to share specific drives with folks, either just a view permission or an editing permission.
Yeah.
And
the other thing I was going to add as well is that, so again, a lot of times there's turnovers in companies, right? So as Nat was mentioning, if you have to come back and figure out how do we get to this deal, you've got that correspondence history and the working versions of the documents, so that if somebody leaves the company and all of that was on their computer in their email inbox, you've still got that history there, which is great. And similar for registered IP, like we're basically providing the companies with ongoing visibility over these processes, because these are not just documents, these are processes that take time. The IP process can take 3 to 5 years, to get one trademark or one patent. A contract negotiation is ongoing and it gets renewed, right? And so it basically gives you a way to track all of these processes over time and know where you are at any given point in the process, so that you don't get lost.
Nat and Jen, there's a question about can the founder see who is viewing their documents?
No, we haven't added that type of audit trail yet.
But it is on the roadmap.
On the roadmap,
So for those
exactly.
who do want to get on the platform and stay on the platform, we have a really exciting roadmap of features coming up. And that is one of them, to really be able to monitor who still, you'll certainly be able to see who has connections. But we also want to be able to monitor who's looking at your documents, what they're doing, how long, what they're really spending their time on.
Mhm.
Okay.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's coming.
Any other questions that were in the chat right now?
And I'll also just mention as well that when you're in the platform, you should have all received a welcome email from Fortress.Legal. If you didn't, let us know and we'll get that sent out to you. But when you are in the platform, on the side menu, you'll also see there's a feedback button, and there's also an email support button. So you can, if you want to use the platform and you want to use one of the modules that you might want a little
Do
bit
feedback.
more of a tutorial on, we can give you a demo. And also, again, if you want to import a data room and keep your original, the format and structure that you already are used to and that you like, then we can help you import your, replicate your data room inside Fortress as well.
Exactly.
And our goal here is really, again, to help the small and medium-sized companies. So even if you do decide to stay on the platform, we've made it very affordable, and we also have different tiers available depending on the stage that your company is at.
Fabulous. Any
Great.
other questions for Nat and Jen? And they'll also be, spoiler alert, they'll be joining us for the session later, covering IP. So they'll be supporting SheBoot in more ways than one. Thank you so much, Nat and Jen.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, ladies. Good luck.
All right, so
Yes, good luck.
I'll be following up with an invitation to Circle. That's where we'll be sharing all the resources from today, the recordings. Get on there, introduce yourself to your fellow founders, and start digging into that due diligence checklist and figure out where you're missing so we can jumpstart in the fall. Anything else, Julia, that you want to mention?
I think you've hit it all. It's a good session and great to see everybody here, and looking forward to seeing these data rooms develop over the next little bit.
And Kathy will follow up there too. Great. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
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 Everyone.
Bye, everyone.